Do you wish that all things wealth and finance were much easier to understand and not presented by a bunch of beige cardigan-wearing geeks? Welcome to the Clever Investor Podcast, where we're dishing up the easiest to understand finance program served in bite-sized chunks, so your brain will thank you as your knowledge grows. Hosted by the brilliant Owen Taylor, a multiple award-winning expert with a glorious knack for explaining the complex world of wealth in the simplest of ways.
Hey clever investors, and welcome to another show. So with property prices rising across all Australian markets and interest rates starting to rise up, there are still plenty of Australians questioning whether now is the best time to sell and upgrade to a bigger home, or do they look at renovating their existing home? In today's episode, we're going to take a look at some of the basic things you need to consider. Now, while upgrading into a bigger and better home is quite often a simpler and more efficient solution, it's not always the most cost-effective option. Sometimes it's just not practical at all. It's really easy to say that before making any major financial decision, it's important to weigh up the benefits of both options and determine which choice might be the right one for you and your financial situation into the future. Now, there's a few key basic elements that we need to consider when deciding between selling to upgrade or renovating that current home. My first tip is take a look around. The condition of your current home is a really important factor to consider when you're deciding if you're going to renovate or go and upgrade. You've got to ask yourself the question, do you actually think that your property now can withstand all these renovations? It might be just too old and fragile for adding another addition onto the top of it. It might not have the right structures or foundations, and there's also the question of land space needed to actually complete your dream renovations. You might end up being really limited in what you can actually do with the space that you've got available. Have a chat with the local council, because they're also going to have a big play in what's going to happen. They might well have concerns about these potential renovations. Now, some homes, especially around the older inner Sydney suburbs and the older Melbourne ones, I know that there are a lot of these suburbs with some type of heritage listing by the local councils. So what this means in the bigger picture is these homeowners are restricted in what can be done. It's not at all uncommon that you're not allowed to change the home street facade, and consequently it means that you can't move upwards. Now think about the cost around the exercise as well. Some of you may well believe that you may be better off simply refinancing the current mortgage, taking out some cash from that and complete these renovations rather than spending the big bucks on buying a new home. And a lot of the thought goes around, well, I've got to pay stamp duty again, and that's just a waste of money. I paid it once years ago. Now, this could be the case in some circumstances, but before you go off and make any decisions, it's important to understand exactly what renovations you want to make and how much it may cost you to do so. It's also important to factor in a bit of fat into the renovation budget. There's no other way of putting it. Costs might, well, actually I'm going to be realistic, the costs will blow out during the renovation process. I don't think I've ever met anybody where their renovation came in at less than what they'd initially budgeted for. Have a think about your current and future needs. So in assessing your current and future needs, both financially and physically, is crucial in determining what's going to be the best options for you moving forward. Often when we're choosing to upgrade, it helps to consider how long you're actually going to intend in staying in the home and whether the possibility of downsizing is going to arise sooner rather than later. You might have 3 kids living at home at the moment, but within the next 7 years, they're probably going to be moved out. They might be at uni. The other thing to map out is how long any renovations might take and where are you going to live during all of this renovations. Now, in a lot of cases, the builder's actually going to want and pretty much demand that you're out of the home because it's now a construction site. And a lot of the time, you're strictly not covered by the insurance on the property. So once they start the construction on your home, it now doesn't come under your home insurance. It's covered by the builder's insurance. And if there's a fire or an incident or a break-in or something and you're there, well, a lot of the time insurance companies look for an excuse not to pay out on things. So be really, really careful with it. Look into your budget. You might need to actually be moving out. Maybe you're going to move back into mum and dad's place for a while. How are you going to actually manage your life? Let's look at getting the gang back together. And I know I sound like a broken record, but you can't and shouldn't think that you can do all of this on your own. I highly recommend the first person you speak to, yeah, you guessed it, is your mortgage broker. Before you go off and start looking at properties or Italian tiles or new bath suites, don't forget, if you can't get the money for this, then the fund's going to run out early. So they are, a conversation with your mortgage broker, going to tell you relatively quickly if your dreams can come true or if we need to make some adjustments to this script. By knowing what you want, how much money you have to spend, and what your future property goals are, you can make the right decision when it comes to upgrading or renovating. I hope this shed a little bit of light onto a subject which is proving very popular at the moment. I'll see you again next week for another edition of...
You have been listening to the Clever Investor Podcast, proudly sponsored this week by Blue Wealth Property. Are you ready to start a new investment journey? Get in touch with the industry leaders, Blue Wealth Property. Blue Wealth have a proven track record in using research to identify growth markets, and Blue Wealth have supported thousands of Australians to buy the right property in the right market at the right time. Go to bluewealth.com.au.